This is episode 633 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, it is hot in New Mexico, and it's even hotter here where I am in Arizona. We're not in our usual assigned positions. In your home studio there. I am here in Phoenix for the annual State Policy Network Convention, which migrates around the country. And this time around, it's a little more convenient than it normally is, being in Phoenix. But it is a little bit toasty out here as we've had this heat wave in August.
Well, hopefully the learning is as hot as the temperature, but that is very difficult to pull off when you're in Phoenix, Paul.
Very true. Yes, I did walk earlier today. Didn't have any meal plans for lunch. Managed to get to an In-N-Out burger without melting on the pavement. It is definitely on the warm side. But yeah, for folks who don't know a little bit of background, the Rio Grande Foundation is a part of the State Policy Network, spn.org. We are independent organization, but we share a lot of ideas and kind of war stories, if you will, with organization based around the country. This year, one of the things that I'm appreciative of is that there's more blue state specific policy uh, exchange. New Mexico's kind of migrated down that path of blue state status, and it's not as easy to get things done in that kind of state. So, as folks know, a lot of what we do is play defense against bad ideas, but trying to leverage and coordinate what blue state think tanks can do to try to improve their situation. So, uh, we'll be here for a few days talking shop with our friends in other states.
Well, very good. And yeah, maybe we you'll have some ideas for how to get some of those successful state ideas back here to New Mexico. Not that we necessarily need that. I think you're well at hand, but always can learn new things, and it is interesting to see. In this these 50 United States of ours, it's interesting. We have some built-in experiments with regard to what public policy does in different ones, and unlike a lot of things in politics, the rankings in terms of how states are doing, it comes out in a real final score that you can compare against others. So
Yeah, absolutely. And for all of our nice weather, been a little hot recently, but it's definitely nice weather on the national scale, a lot of sun, a lot of beautiful outdoor activities. Uh, Oil and gas, especially in recent years, has become the dominant feature of New Mexico's economy. And we just haven't gotten the politicians in place to actually do some things that would really make New Mexico uh, everything that we can be. And that's really what it's all about, is living up to your potential as a state. And we're working on it. We're a few good free market policies and crime reductions, education reforms away from getting this state to really succeed. And unfortunately, until then, we're going to continue to struggle. So, Wally, one of the policies that we're talking about now involves Mayor Tim Keller here in Albuquerque. He has put forth a couple of pronged plan that he believes will revitalize downtown. So the first component is, now they're using the term TIF, tax increment financing. Previously, I've seen it in New Mexico as TIDD or tax increment development districts. Uh, it's a two-part plan. The first part is to create a downtown TIF or TID. The same concept applies to both. Basically, the area targeted where you're within the boundaries of the TID or TIF. That is the target for money that is available. Essentially, you're hanging on to a lot of tax revenues, whereas services are supported across city government, county governments, et cetera. And what really it amounts to is a form of a subsidy. So the city of the downtown area of Albuquerque would generate its own additional revenue and get to hang on to that, whereas other areas of the city would be providing a subsidy. Now, Rio Grande Foundation, full disclosure, is based in downtown Albuquerque. We've posed TIFs and TIDs as a general rule because we believe that that basically city areas should be able to support themselves, not be funded, across other governments and creating robbing Peter to pay Paul kinds of situations. So it's not a surprise that we're not super enthusiastic about this particular aspect of Keller's plan. The second part is a business improvement district. Now, a bid is an interesting thing. It's got a private management aspect where property owners essentially in an election are asked to vote to agree to pay additional taxes, generally to the credit of the bid. Those taxes, I'll use the air quotes, those taxes are given to a private sector organization that manages the bid. Now, folks who spent time downtown a year or two ago remember folks running around with green trash bins and cleaning up trash and those kinds of things. It's you can certainly argue that these are useful in their assistance in helping clean up the downtown core or whatever area you might want to bid for. But as I've said, as many others have said, this is not completely original Paul guessing thinking here, Wally. I know you're going to be stunned and amazed by this, but none of these ideas really solve the critical problem facing downtown and the critical problem facing our city, which is out of control crime and homelessness. And until the mayor gets serious about addressing those issues, no TIF or TID or BID is going to solve downtowns or other areas of town's problems. Wally, what say you?
Oh, and Paul, when I first started to read your blog post, before you even said it, I was like, well, until you do something about crime, many of these things are going to be just so much window dressing. That is the real issue. And I don't know what that's going to take. Money gets allocated for more police, and then we don't hire more police, and then we have our we have our state legislators that are even that are told by the governor. And believe me, let me just say, I'll give her full credit to say if she's absolutely right on her items. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't, but there are some things that could really help with law enforcement and crime in Albuquerque, the competency issues, and the state legislators ignore that. And so I don't know this. What is it downtown needs? If downtown was a better place to live and work because of the crime, I think maybe some things like this could help, but maybe that would be all the help it would need to get it going. It's amazing that downtown is what has done as well as it has. There has been some new development there over the years. There's some new facilities that have been built. But it's a tough place to work. It's a tough place to live. and yeah, crime is it. So I guess my idea would be after crime, maybe you could do some things, but maybe first things first. And they talk about root causes. What's is downtown's root causes a lack of a TID or a TIF or a some sort of development, or is it just that maybe we need to have less crime there?
Yeah. So a few other aspects of this, and this is, this really does get to the heart of governance, and resources should not be an issue when it comes to hiring police and public safety. My view is that everything else government does, local government should be on the table for cuts if they have to, in order to hire enough police and create a safe environment. We know it's been a long time since downtown was, I think, a safe area. There's no question that it's gotten worse. Rio Grande Foundation moved into downtown Albuquerque at really a time, I think it's safe to say that pre-pandemic things were looking pretty good relative historically speaking for downtown Albuquerque. And they've gone from maybe as good as it had been since the 50s to as bad as it's been in anybody's memory. So that is a fundamental issue with the crime, but there needs to be a concerted effort. And if the mayor is not going to support or get behind the police officers, then that's something that's a problem. And I really think that whatever the obstacle is to getting us up to speed with the number of police officers and the public safety issue, that should be and should have been the number one focus for this mayor from day one. And it clearly hasn't been. I don't even think it's the second or third or fourth priority, especially for this mayor. But to be fair, RJ Berry did not do a particularly good job with managing the police force. For kind of, I think, a more effective approach, you have to go all the way back to Mayor Marty Chavez. So that's one aspect. I mentioned COVID. Um, as a general rule, COVID created a massive shift in office space demand or the lack thereof. Albuquerque is by no means the only city in the country, but we've always dealt with the issue of just too many offices chasing too few of those office jobs. And downtown Albuquerque is not alone. So there's been efforts to try more housing. And then if you do have likely employers who either have been downtown or could be downtown, they see the situation and they move elsewhere. So there's a lot of headwinds now that are maybe even worse than they were just 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. Uh, it's there's so many things that need to be addressed, but until and one of the things I wanted to mention is, of course, there's the economic growth issue. If New Mexico does not use its oil and gas wealth effectively to bring in new jobs and new employers, that's going to just further the challenges of downtown Albuquerque. I'm not saying that you're going to get every new employer to come down to downtown, but certainly if you're not really working, and I think we agree that they're not really working in Santa Fe to develop our economy, diversify it, use that oil and gas money for broad-based economic reforms, you really have no shot. So crime is 1A, 1B, 1C, and then broader economic development issues need to be addressed as well.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, it's one of those. It's these are not new issues. Is that on the economic development front, we have quality of education in the public schools, and we have our friend the gross receipts tax, the tax that kills things before it even comes to live sometimes. So
Well, one thing that I relating to downtown, I had a after hours meeting, which occasionally happens, and decided to venture downtown for that meeting. There's been a lot of talk around Ex Novo, the local brewery, microbrewery. Many, I believe, say that it's the best uh, New Mexico microbrewery around. Ex Novo's based in Corrales. They've opened up a new, very nice looking facility in downtown Albuquerque off of Central and 7th. And on Thursday night last week, went to that Ex Novo brewery. There was an hour and a half wait to seat two people. So Ex Novo and the new development there downtown will be very interesting to watch. Hopefully, they can overcome the challenges that downtown always faces with the homeless population, with the crime. Uh, it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch, especially once kind of the newness wears off and 6 months or a year from now, you have more normal level crowds down there. Uh, it's just, and just, keeping the security of that facility, both during business hours and after business hours.
yeah, Paul, it's been a long time since I've worked in downtown Albuquerque, but I did, and you bring up a tangential point to one that I was thinking of is that yeah, downtown Albuquerque can be a scary place, but from a business point of view, if you're kind of a 8 to 5 sort of business, the daylight does some good things most of the time, but there's been times even back as 20 years ago that things would get a little even more iffy when the sun went down. And so, there's the thing about you need law enforcement and you need policing, and sometimes you need it when it's not convenient for the police because that's when the crime's happening. So interesting point. And yeah, that's it's good that there's something that's positive and drawing people to downtown. And then, maybe it would be ironic, but that a microbrewery could be the impetus to put it back on track. But we can hope.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to oversell it, but maybe this is the most positive start we've had to a podcast for a while. Although, really crime, there's nothing positive about that situation when it comes to Albuquerque and downtown. But this story does have some positivity there. And at this point, we don't know several details about what is being called baby bonds. It was written up in the paper. There is going to be a bill in the legislature in January, but as of right now, there's still a lot of ideas that need to be fleshed out with regard to baby bonds. But we'll talk about what we know and then we don't know, and the unknown unknowns, perhaps, as Donald Rumsfeld used to say way back in the Iraq war days. So here's what we know. We, of course, have a massive budget surplus and continue to in New Mexico. The idea is to put together $6,000 bonds for each child born in New Mexico and give those bonds to New Mexico babies, regardless of income. So this would be a universal deal available to all children born in New Mexico. The money would be invested by the State Investment Council to be used for education, housing, and other expenses upon reaching the child's 18th birthday. The estimated annual cost would be $120 million at current birth rates, which is, of course, a minuscule fraction of the state's $3.5 billion annual surplus. So that is what we know so far. in this, and I guess I'll get your reaction first, Wally.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's a interesting idea. I think they could do and probably have done a lot worse things with the largesse of state revenues that have come out of the oil and gas industry. And $6,000 per baby. If this could move things towards having those babies grow up to be first students who learn and then adults who enter the workforce and do good things, that's fine. uh I think if you look at the differential between what people earn over a lifetime with a high school diploma versus not, and a college degree versus not, and that college to high school is getting more narrow, seems like every year. But that $6,000 that would turn into say 25,000 at graduation, that's not an amount to be sneezed at. But boy, when you look at what the value of that education is to a child, if they have a good one compared to if they don't have a good one, it pales compared to that, and that's money we're already spending. So maybe a little bit of a theme, like in the Mayor Keller downtown plan, maybe the New Mexico plan is, yeah, do these baby bonds. That's great. Let's get the public schools working better so that when they turn 18, they will have something that they can use that money for that will move them in a good direction.
Well, you are on my wavelength. No surprise there, Wally. But I had a few thoughts when I saw this proposal. The first one was the state is already providing so-called free college. So why limit this bond to when the child turns 18? Uh, in fact, this is the second incident. We had the New Mexico Voices for Children essentially saying that schools do a poor job of educating and preparing minority students for taking standardized tests and all the skills that those require. Uh, they almost dip their toe into the school choice swimming pool, but do not for obvious ideological reasons. This baby bond idea, uh, my take is, well, why don't we just take those dollars, up the number, up the amount, and then those kids could be empowered to choose, or their families could choose the school that makes the most sense for them. Because the issue is not, and this was always the fundamental flaw with regard to free college. College, if you've got a high school diploma, you're in pretty good shape. Even if you don't go to college, you may not succeed in life, but if you've got that high school diploma, chances are pretty good that you're going to be okay here in our society these days, especially if you're just a hard worker. Now, free college then adds the extra financial cushion. So if you have gotten a high school diploma, you've got free college, you should be in pretty good shape. The challenge is getting the kids to that point, and our K-12 system, as we know, is dead last in the country and really fails a lot of our kids. So why not free those dollars up earlier, or even put more dollars into these baby bonds so that the kids and their families can choose the education that makes sense for them? Uh, One of the other questions, and this is very much logistical and political, is uh, what if families move out of New Mexico? I guess, there's a philosophical discussion that you have to undertake as to if somebody moves to New Mexico, takes advantage of this, and then goes to Texas or Arizona or wherever. Is this something that people are going to be comfortable with in the state of New Mexico? And then finally, as it stands now, and certainly for the foreseeable future, there's going to be plenty of money available for this kind of program. But uh, just making sure that this is all based on firm financial footing. Uh, it's obviously a relatively trivial amount of money when you're talking about $120 million a year, but maybe we want to do something bigger and something bolder, and are we going to have the resources available to continue this program long into the future? So I think the first two are the ones that really would give me pause before I jumped onto this particular plan and said this is what we should be doing. But certainly, I agree with you, Wally. Among the uses of our permanent funds, this is one of the better ideas we've seen out of the legislature.
Yeah, and Paul, you're the devil's always in the details. So, what if your parents lived in New Mexico and you happened to be born when you were, say, in Phoenix on an event, but your parents' residence? Does the child not get it? And what if you moved here when you're a week old, or what if you leave? These are all important questions. So, it would be interesting to hear what the answers to those are if this moves forward. The thing that I don't like about that is that it's the sort of thing that the legislature could spend almost the whole session dealing with the details of that and not worrying about some of the things like crime and education that really are the meat and potatoes, bread and butter, and dessert of some of the needs of New Mexico right now.
Yeah, and on that note, I wanted to highlight a piece that when I have more time here, either during my conference in Phoenix or in the next few days, I'm going to do a further analysis of a opinion piece that appeared in the Sunday paper written by State Senator George Munoz, Rep. Nathan Small, and Wayne Probst. And these are individuals, of course, George Munoz, Senate Finance Committee Chair. Nathan Small is with the Vice Chair of the Legislative Finance Committee, and Probst is Cabinet Secretary of New Mexico's Department of Finance and Administration. And these guys uh, really lay out what I think is a very unfortunate vision for New Mexico. Their basic point is that New Mexico is awash in resources and they're going to put money aside for the future. And we've talked about this to an extent in the past, but this article really highlights, I think, the fundamental flaws with regard to the way New Mexico is currently using its oil and gas surplus. And I'm certainly not somebody who wants government to grow any bigger. We've achieved that in recent years. The question is, are we going to actually undertake a intelligence and common sense approach to bringing economic growth and economic diversity to our state? And this op-ed basically says, oh, we're going to put all this money away. Well, we have real problems right here in New Mexico. We talk about them on a pretty regular basis on Tipping Point, New Mexico. And if we were doing most things really well in New Mexico and had this budget surplus, that might be something to argue about, is what we do with this money, putting it aside. Really, we desperately need to diversify our economy, really bring choice to our state education system, and address the crime issues. And none of those are really being done in any very sufficient fashion to address those problems. And so putting a bunch of money aside for future use by government while your house is on fire is not really a great idea, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Paul, if there's anything, it's like we as a state have a crisis of confidence that sometimes, and these plans kind of fall into line. We know we're not going to spend the money well or do things that really make things better, so let's just put it away so we'll have enough money to barely scrape by when the oil and gas industry slows down, whenever that is, 10 minutes from today or 10,000 years, whichever it is. So there are things that work, but I think a lot of times New Mexico has been sold a bill of goods about what does work, and everyone says, "Oh, that and I don't know. I'll just pick a couple, the Rail Runner and the Spaceport, for example. And then when you look back 5, 10, 20 years, you're like, man, that was probably a big mistake. And so I do think that there is that crisis of confidence, and politicians in New Mexico love to be the ones that pick winners and losers, not put a solid system in place that encourages all businesses and lets the free market decide what the right investment is. They have to get involved a lot of times in things that are a little bit shaky, and we have some examples of those recently as well.
I'm going to be a little less charitable than you, Wally, and say that it's not a crisis of confidence, but a crisis of ignorance. And the crisis of ignorance is the result of both the people, and we always have to make sure that the voters are held to account. And unfortunately, most of the voters seem to think that this is about all we can do in New Mexico. We really don't have any means of improving our state in any substantial or long-term way, and we're just going to kind of hope for the best with some of these resources. And putting them aside is essentially a decision without making a decision. And again, this is different and separate from what you and I as individuals would do, because we as individuals need to save for a future when we're unable to work. We need to and want to retire and enjoy our golden years doing the things that we want to do. Government is a going concern. Government is something that will continue to operate here in New Mexico long beyond our time on this planet. And they need to bring more human capital to New Mexico, more economic prosperity to New Mexico, to salvage, to save, to improve upon the human capital that already exists here, and bring even more to bring wealth and prosperity to our state. And we're just not seeing that. And our legislators, George Munoz and Nathan Small are fairly opposite as Democrats go. Small is in the progressive wing of the party. George Munoz is about as moderate as you get in New Mexico legislative politics these days. So it's probably also there's a function of they can't agree, so they'll just do whatever they can agree on, which in this case is just pouring more money into our sovereign wealth funds, which Republicans running for the legislature and being elected to office, I think this is a great opportunity for them, but they have to be able to talk about it, and they have to be able to share with people that New Mexico can succeed, that we can grow, we can get better. And one of the things that could do that for us right now is using this money in an effective way. But we're not. Flat and simple, plain and simple.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
the
Wally.
definition of policy small ball is what we're playing right now. Is like we'll throw a few items of window dressing and let's just put the rest in the bank and see what happens in a few years.
Just a quick note, I was in National Review recently with a piece detailing the harm that a Kamala Harris presidential administration could do to New Mexico's economy. Nobody knows exactly what she believes on a whole host of issues, which is scary enough, but she has repeatedly talked about banning fracking, the process that generates about 95% of New Mexico's oil and gas, which of course does fund our state, could be used in ways that are transformative in New Mexico's economy, but are not being, as we just outlined. But I would rather have those dollars, not just for the state, but for jobs and people being gainfully employed, And of course, for American energy independence, a ban on fracking would be devastating, not just to New Mexico, but to the country as a whole, not just economically, but geopolitically speaking. So I write about this. Unfortunately, it is behind a paywall at National Review's website. You can still Google it and find it if you would like. And if you're a subscriber to National Review, God bless you and enjoy it right there. But you can also find it at the Rio Grande Foundation and Heirs of Enchantment pages if you're inclined.
Yeah, and Paul, the number, banning fracking to this point politically in America has been like a lot of celebrities who threaten to leave the United States if certain people are elected president. It's tended to be hollow threats, but if these things are followed through on, it could be a way different situation, not only for New Mexico, but because now New Mexico is such a large part of the energy picture of the United States. It could be very interesting and very scary for the United States as well.
Yeah. Couple of quick things. EBON, the new solar company that the governor is wooing to New Mexico, to Mesa del Sol, says they will begin construction of their new solar plants in Q4, so the end of the year. There's still aspects of that agreement that have not been determined, including just how costly the IRBs, the industrial revenue bonds, will be. Maxion says they're planning the same general time frame to break ground. So we shall see what happens with those two entities, both of which, as we discussed last week, have collapsing share prices. They're losing significant money on every single share of stock. So EBON, of course, is more recent. Maxion was a little over a year ago in terms of its announcement. I remain skeptical, but the fact that EBON just came out and said all this, I did see in one of the stories that they're hoping for some kind of federal loan, which could get down to fleecing taxpayers at both the state and federal level, as well as local. But this is in my estimation a highly speculative list of agreements that this governor has come out with on EBON and Maxion.
Well, and then in EBON in particular, unless they've been doing a ton of work behind the scenes, it doesn't seem like anything happens from a permitting point of view for anything, larger than a hot dog stand in Albuquerque in New Mexico within 2-3 months. So we'll see what happens. So I I I am optimistic on both of these, Paul, for no particular reason. I'm hoping against hope.
All right. Well, we will see. I will also go with they don't make their Q4 groundbreaking uh, goals for either company, but we shall see. Quickly on Kamala Harris, she's finally outlined a few specific ideas. One, $25,000 in federal assistance for first-time home buyers, and another is somehow addressing price controls and stopping grocery companies and supermarkets from overcharging, as she says, for their goods. And these are both ludicrous policy ideas. Of course, $25,000 for first-time home buyers is both bribe more than anything else, and it is driven by inflation. And of course, the price of groceries has gone up also due to inflation. And both of these were exacerbated, although not 100% the fault of the administration that she's currently serving in. Certainly, if either of these ideas were worth trying, she could have done something within the current administration to roll out these solutions, quote unquote. So, uh, color me skeptical. I may be more skeptical even about Kamala Harris's policy ideas than the prospects for these solar companies to kick off and break ground in New Mexico and be successful. But boy, these are just economic ignorance at their finest.
Yeah, and Paul, when I saw her talking about this, she called it price gauging, not price gouging. And maybe I've taken enough economics to be dangerous, but man, if you don't even know what it's called, I'm not sure you could know what a disaster it was. And let's be fair. The last time we tried wage price controls in the United States, it was not implemented by a Democrat. It was implemented by a Republican. That doesn't mean that was a good idea then and that it did any good. I think it did a lot of harm. And boy, groceries are just the wrong place to do that. It's one of the lowest lowest margin businesses out there, and to somehow imply that, it's just greed. So put those in place and we'll get a maybe hopefully not too big of a taste, but I have a feeling we'll get a taste about the what the Soviet people felt about their grocery store situation 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, you are correct that these policies were last really implemented in a semi-coherent way by the Nixon administration. Of course, they uh, got us off of the Bretton Woods agreements, and really Nixon helped unleash inflation and modern inflation by severing the dollar from gold. But if you had on your bingo card that the ultra progressive Kamala Harris would jump on board with Richard Nixon's policies, that's a bingo card that I don't think many people would have had. So, very, very interesting and strange, and really a indicator of how far we've come in terms of ideological sorting. For all their flaws, today's Republican Party would not, I don't think, be very excited about wage and price controls or just price controls. They still have a much greater interest in free market policies. We could talk about Trump and trade. We could talk about Trump and another number of other policies, many of which I think a lot of people give him a pass on simply because he is the nominee and he's not nearly as left wing in summary as Kamala Harris. But yeah, price controls definitely have potential to do irreparable harm to our country. And will be, as she continues, hopefully, to roll out some specifics in terms of policy. So now we have three economic policies we can talk about relating to Kamala Harris. Not taxing tips, so taking one from the Trump playbook, then price controls from Nixon, and then just paying people $25,000 as first time home buyers. Uh, Not really something that's been done, although you could argue that similar policies resulted in the boom and crash back in 2008, where the housing situation in our country got out of control, and giving money away to give people to buy new houses would be a great way to re-inflate that bubble and then set in motion the collapse and crash that we saw back in 2008.
Yeah, and just one final point on that is that, in 2008, 25,000 would go a long way towards a down payment. But with all the inflation we have, that may be just enough to get you into a mortgage that you couldn't afford, which was the definition of the 2008 housing collapse and economic collapse that faced America.
Absolutely. All right, Wally. Well, We'll be back in studio next week, but for now, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.